Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Hold on to the edge of your seats because you are in for quite the ride. It's time for the Granada Forum Radio Show. Right now, live on air with your host, Granada Wendy.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Granada Forum Radio program. Today is the 22nd of June, and it's about 7 o'clock, there you go, Pacific Standard Time. Revolution Radio is the #1 commercial-free, listener-supported internet talk radio station in the world. We're located at freedomslips.com. That's freedomslips.com, or go to, I believe it's Revolution Radio, or Radio...
Revolution.radio.
Revolution.radio. I'm going to have to get that one. Revolution.radio. And you can get to us. By the way, too, if you'd like to go to the home page and leave equivalent to a cup of coffee to keep the programming on the air, we appreciate it. And if you'd like to go to Nighthawk's special for a donation of $100, I believe, it's 3,500 seeds and how to grow, plant, and store, so it's quite worth it. So I'd like to thank Mr. Nighthawk for that one. Thank you, Mr. Nighthawk. I'd like to introduce my wonderful co-host, Mr. Nick Pearson.
Hey.
And our wonderful producer who we cannot live without, Mr. Richard Kane.
Hi there.
There you go. We have an incredible guest tonight, as you know. We have Deborah Tavares back with us. And her website, of course, as you know, is www.stopthecrime.net. That's www.stopthecrime.net. And we'll get with her in just about 1 minute. Real quick, too, we will be live at the 46th Annual Cancer Control Convention, September 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 2018, at the Glendale Hilton Hotel. If you go to the cancercontrolsociety.com, that's cancercontrolsociety.com, go right on their website, or call them at 323-663-7801. That's 663-7801 for all the alternative therapies to cancer, so please check them out. Also, too, we'll be live at the National Health Solutions Expo on the 22nd and the 23rd, 2018, September. That's 22nd, 23rd, 2018 of September. And we'll be at the 5855 West Century Boulevard at Los Angeles 90045 at the LAX Marriott. We'll be there. Phone number for this information is 562 area code 212-3479. That's 212-3479, and that's going to be a barn burner as well. So without any further ado, let me introduce the lady of the hour, and for all the information that we love her so much for, Miss Deborah Tavares.
Well, Wendy and Nick, thank you so much for having me back on this evening. We have a very important broadcast this evening about the global disruption of our food supply. And we're going to talk about that in as much detail as we can fit in. I do have a guest, which I will be bringing on in a moment or two. But I want to just give everyone an outline, an idea of what we're going to be covering. We're going to be talking about pharmaceuticals and the rebranding as food. And farm is now F-A-R-M, pharmaceuticals, which is now rebranded as food. This, as I said, is a worldwide disruption of traditional farming. This is everything that many of you have already heard about, bringing in the United States with the Wildlands Project. This is a silent weapons system of weaponized warfare under the guise of climate change. And this is the advancement of the climate action plans that all of your cities and counties have adopted. This is a global plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This plan is nothing more than transforming world markets, reducing our access to resources, including food, which is the topic of this evening. We, of course, know that the climate action plans, again, it is a cover for covert weather weapons and economic warfare programs, and it is a silent weapons system. So as we move through this evening, we're going to be talking with my guest, which is Randy Yarborough. And I met Randy a number of years ago, and I'm going to introduce him so that all of you can meet Randy now. He's been involved in agriculture off and on for over 56 years in the United States in the Colorado area. And he started driving a tractor at about the age of 9 in the panhandle of Texas. He was also involved in 4-H through his younger years, raised cattle and chickens, and currently helps his wife, a master gardener, tend to a garden to try to become more self-sufficient and truly know where and how our food is produced. The past 20 years, Randy has devoted much of his time into the study of the emergency declared war powers of March 9th, 1933, and how that changed our government from a republic to a war government, and how agriculture was taken over by the government corporate interests, and that our food production, one of the most vital undertaking for a secure nation, has been taken out of the hands of the many and placed in the hands of a few. So Randy, I want to welcome you to the program this evening. Step in whenever you'd like, but what I would initially like you to tell the listeners is your experience as a farmer and how you have seen the Emergency War Powers Act, which gives the control of food, transportation, water to the corporate structure of the United States, and how you've already seen the impact on farms and how the farmers, the traditional farmers, now are being bought out by big ag, and just what you see as the transfer of private-owned lands, which were farms, into the Wildlands Project. And Randy, thank you so much.
Deborah, thanks for having me on tonight, and I want to say good evening to Babylon out there. That 85 years we now have been under a state of national emergency, declared by Congress on March the 9th of 33, and it continues on. They haven't ended it. They've added to it. All you need to do is read Congressional Report 93-549, Senate Report. It admits right there where all of the people have lived their lives under emergency rule in this United States of America.
Well, that's an excellent point, Randy, because I think fundamentally you've started out with the foundation of our reality, and without people understanding that we don't exist as the country we have been taught in school that we have, we won't know how this assault is upon us to sequester all of our resources, food, water, fuel now. We've learned a lot about what is now happening with petroleum. They are ending it because they've taught us that it is fossil fuels. But we'll go into that a bit later. But as you were saying, Senate Report 93549. And what I found, Randy, is so interesting about this, that it's been an ongoing annual declared national state of emergency. Every sitting president since 1933 has declared the national state of emergency. And what people will learn when they read Senate Report 93549 is all the government needs to continue is to have the public's opinion on their side. And if public opinion can be kept in sufficient degree on the side of an illusion of a government, statutes and executive orders through the executive branch can continue to be passed. The Constitution has had no meaning since 1933 and was suspended and has been. We're under law, we're under emergency war powers, and this is critical. This is absolutely critical, and I'm so happy that you brought that up, Randy, because that really, really is the basis of where our food conversation is going to go, and it will go into, of course, the understanding that Senate Report 93549 tells us that at any time, all the time, the food and transportation and air and travel can all be taken over, and it has. Communication as well. We're seeing all of these things
Here's
happen.
a quick question also for Randy. How many different government agencies are there now that regulate farming in America?
You've got the USDA, you've got the FDA, you've got the EPA, you've got the Department of Energy, you've got Health and Human Services on the food stamp side. And if you look at to bring up the food stamps, they're getting ready to pass a new agricultural bill. Because if they don't pass a new bill, we revert back to the 1948 law, which would, put the farmers back in a lot of control of their situations. But that's just a small list. Then add on top of that all of the state bureaucracies. But, and
then of course
ago,
we have to not forget the United Nations as well as the international bankers, because that is who's running the show. And we know that all the agencies that you named and the many more that there are under the policies and controls of the United Nations, the World Banks, the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, and the UN.
Since you brought up the UN, quote, this is Public Law 313 from April 14th of 1952. Quote, whereas the existing state of war with Japan is the last declared state of war to which the United States is a party, and the termination thereof and of the national emergencies proclaimed in 1939 and 41 would render certain statutory provisions inoperative. And whereas some of these statutory provisions are needed to ensure the national security and the capacity of the United States to support the United Nations in its efforts to establish and maintain world peace.
I am so
happy. There,
yes.
They just told you that the national emergencies must continue for us to be a part of the United Nations.
Right.
That's exactly right. So everyone that's listening, again, pull down and visit Senate Report 93549. You will also learn that under the powers delegated by all these statutes, the President has and can and is seizing property, organizing control of production, seizing commodities, assigning military forces abroad, institutes martial law, seizes and controls all transportation communication, regulates the operation of private enterprise, restricts travel, and many other controls over all Americans. And just so that everyone's clear, we said that this is an extended state of war powers, national emergency on an annual basis. And this was extended by the current CEO of USA Inc., which is Donald Trump. He is the CEO of USA Inc., and this was extended via Executive Order 13814 on October the 20th of 2017. So, Randy, now that we've established the fact that our government has been seized, where do we go now?
Also, Deborah, on a lot of the statutes that Congress passed in 1933, it basically says this emergency over banking, over agriculture, over industry, over communications, this emergency will continue until such point in time as the executive informs Congress that the emergency has ended. So there's
and of course it's extended every year.
Oh, they don't even have to extend it.
They do. They do.
They do. But anyway.
That is true. And this is the foundation for the program this evening and the taking over of the food supply, because it can be taken over, and it is. So, Randy, I'd really like for you to talk about what you have come to understand is happening to the farms and ranches, because I know that you know many farmers and ranchers, and you can see what's happening in the United States. But this is an illustration abroad and overseas as well. But I'd like you to just discuss with the listeners how the Wildlands Project is coming into play, which is literally moving people out of rural areas because rural areas are considered sprawl and unsustainable in the United Nations policies that all of our cities and counties have adopted. So how do you see that playing out?
I see it more and more that if you take northern Colorado, north of Denver, up through there, the cities are taking the water that was used for the irrigation. The lands are drying up. The Department of Agriculture has what they call the CRP program that was supposed to take marginal land, turn it back to grasslands, and they pay the farmer now not to farm that land. The economic situation is more of what's driving the individual family farms off the land.
Could you explain that explain that in detail so that people understand?
In 1933, when they declared the emergency over agriculture, they still recognized that the Constitution was there. What they did is they didn't take the land, they didn't take the crops, but they took the marketing rights of the farmers. And they said, if you sign up for the program, here's the deal. You get to grow X number of acres of wheat, X number of acres of corn, of milo, barley, whatever it is, the regional main crop areas. And in taking of these marketing rights, they said, okay, this is the Fifth Amendment taking. How are we going to compensate the farmers for this? So in the law, and the law today as it stands, it says the policy of Congress is that farmers are to receive parity pricing, which basically means what the farmers receive is in balance with the rest of the economy, labor, capital, cost and input of goods, and the USDA figures those figures out every month since 1937. They publish.
So basically, Randy, it's fair to say that the farmers are sharecroppers on the land.
Basically, the farmers are working for the bank, but
Absolutely.
We can go into that in a second. So Congress was having a hard time figuring out how they're going to do this. How do we implement this? How do we do it? They finally said, okay, this is how we're going to figure out and do it. And we did it from 1941 to 1953. World War II wasn't what brought us out of the Depression. When we started paying the right price for the raw material production, because all wealth comes from the land. Your wealth is not your money. Your money is a claim on wealth.
And it's fiat to boot.
The clothes on your back, the car in your driveway, the house, the roof over your head, that's your wealth. But, okay, getting sidelined here. So they did this parity program for those 11 years. At the end of that time, farmers were at a point where they were making enough money that they didn't have to go into long-term debt to run their operation. We have records from the 1953 American Bankers Association meeting complaining that they had all this money to loan, but agriculture was strong enough that they didn't need to come in and borrow the money. And since 1953, we saw the parity pricing program slowly disappear. Today, the farmer now receives about 33 cents on the dollar of what he should be receiving.
Now you're telling me that is Great Depression returns. Is that what I recall our discussion being?
Well, the price that farmers received in the Great Depression in the 30s was somewhere around 40 to 50%. Today,
so
the farmers are receiving 33%.
Yeah, so it's less. So everyone that's listening, they're getting less than they were in 1933. And that's extremely important to see how the taking of the farm land is now occurring, and how the food shift is occurring, because we're going to be talking about shortly, after Randy lays out the plight of the farmers, we're going to be laying out the plight of all of us with toxic food.
And,
so go ahead, Randy.
There's another aspect of that too, though, because it's not just the fact that the farmers are getting paid less, but you got giant companies like Monsanto who are suing local farmers into oblivion because they're claiming that they stole the patents on their seeds because the cross-pollination from the Monsanto plants are getting into the the non-GMO plants, and the Monsanto comes in and sues these other farmers into oblivion. So they're putting out of business that way also.
And they are.
Yes, and we've looked at. I belong to an organization called NORM, National Organization for Raw Materials. normeconomics.org. We have contemplated a lawsuit where we take a 40-acre plot. We notice the neighbors. We notice Monsanto with notice and demand saying we are planting certified non-GMO heritage corn. Now, as soon as Monsanto's gene from their corn pollutes our corn, we will sue Monsanto and say, remove your gene from our corn. And we've played with this idea for several years of, okay, how do we do this? And we've drafted briefs and drafted this and drafted that. And
well, let me just stop you right there, Randy, because, of course, part of the taking of the United States and the corporate structure was the setup of our judiciary system under Rothschild, and attorneys have bar cards. And our legal system is set up to further the taking of this country. And sadly, litigation doesn't prove so well for any of us. And that's why we're now where we are, because we have an illegitimate court structure as well. And I would recommend everybody read this book, Fruit from a Poisonous Tree, by Melvin, M-E-L-V-I-N, Stamper, S-T-A-M-P-E-R. And in there you will find out about the bar and the dangerous reality of how the bar has brought us further and faster to where we all are right now, and why we're having this discussion about the taking of the food supply. So, Randy, getting back to how the farmers are affected, as was just mentioned with the GMO, another way in which their crops are decimated, right? Because didn't I hear recently that China would not buy GMO materials from the United States?
That's been off again and on again over the years. And China has, comes out, no GMOs, and then, okay, well, yeah, we'll take a few, and back and forth, because basically the corn and soybean crops now are so contaminated that you cannot, it's very hard to get non-GMO soybeans now, and very, very hard to get guaranteed non-GMO corn seed. So
now we have a polluted system, we have polluted soil, and we have the intentionality of polluting all of these.
Then,
will you speak to the requirement of farmers to buy fertilizers that are certified by the big ag industry, or they cannot sell their materials? Because I think that's really important as well for everyone to understand.
Not on fertilizer. You know, you can plant just about anything you want. The main bulk of the commodities, the corn and the soybeans, are basically 85% all GMO.
Okay.
Some are what they have BT, which is a botulism. Anyway, it's BT corn, and it's also Roundup ready, so they can spray it with glyphosate, and it produces a toxin to the insects that eat it. That is not supposed to enter the food supply, but it does through feeding it to the livestock, because that's where it ends up.
Right. So we have a predicament here in this country where we have the international bankers moving in and allowing the contamination of our food supply. And we know that this causes cancer. It's been shown, and of course many people have been fighting against GMO for years now, and yet it's still progressing. And we're going to get into how Monsanto is moving in further into the food supply here in a bit. But continue with your story about the plight of the farmers.
Well, another thing that since we have industrial ag now, where farmers are, it used to be a median-sized farm was 200 acres. Then it got to 640 acres, a square mile. We've got farmers now farming 50,000 acres, 80,000 acres on one farm. And what they've done is they've taken their neighbors. As their neighbors have gone broke, they have a good relationship with the bank, so the bank will loan them the money. But these big farmers with this huge acreages and everything else are up to their eyebrows in debt. The debt is just there, and a lot of these bigger guys are going broke. Now, another thing that's happened in agriculture... Now,
you mean the smaller farms are going broke and being consumed by the corporate farms, is that right?
No, the big guys, the guys that have...
So the larger farms are being taken down, too.
The little farms are going broke.
Right.
Especially with agricultural pricing, the way it is.
Right.
Now, another big thing with industrial ag is the monoculture. And by that, I mean we have now, instead of 50 or 60 varieties of corn, we have 8 or 10. Instead of having several varieties of soybeans, we have 3 or 4. And so the climate, the moisture, and everything else, we have grown these crops to survive within this moisture temperature area range. If anything changes in there, we are on the verge of a global famine.
Well, then that would certainly speak to the weather weapons and the controlled weather from geoengineering, because certainly they're putting farms underwater and decimating rural communities.
Why would Monsanto spend millions to come up with a variety of corn that is aluminum tolerant?
Yes.
Where did all of a sudden all of this aluminum come from?
That's what they're spraying in the air.
Corn is showing signs of, and the forests, but the crops showing signs of degradation, aluminum poisoning.
Right.
Well, because of course I know that aluminum, strontium, barium are just parts of the heavy metals that are being sprayed overhead in Rothschild's weather modification programs, the international bankers.
Well, I was also going to say also, if people don't really understand what aluminum, the problem with aluminum is most of the people that start contracting Alzheimer's disease have aluminum in the brain. It doesn't go away. It starts to really affect the way that the brain chemistry works. And so that's probably another reason why that stuff is being sprayed in the air, because they really do want to do away with everybody.
And they do. So, Randy, so the plight of the farms, they're being consumed. They're being decimated by genetically modified crops that are airborne and changing neighbors' crops. And the farms are going out of business, and they're making less money now than they did during the Great Depression. And because of the ongoing national state of emergency and the parity pricing that's paid, the farmers are and have been no more than sharecroppers on their land. And now we're seeing the Wildlands Project, and I'm hearing some jiggling around of some things in the background.
Yeah, I was going to ask what that noise was.
Okay, thank you. I'm referring now to the Wildlands Project and the map. And you can type that in, everyone that's listening, and you can understand what is happening with the Biodiversity Treaty and the forced transformation and relocation of all people and cities to comply with environmental policies and, of course, the guise of the reduction of CO2 emissions. And on that map, you're going to see where there are core reserves and corridors where no human access is allowed. You will see buffer zones where it's highly regulated, the use. And you will see Indian reservations and military reservations. And what is important to note is that all humans, all of us, are going to be and are now being forced into designated settlement reservations, which are the smart cities, the resilient cities, now being turned into electric grids of death with all of the frequencies. And we're going to actually get into that, Randy, because when I was researching the decimation of the food supply, I found how the World Bank, Goldman Sachs, Rothschild, Rockefeller are working together in tandem with the Resilient Cities program, which is the removal of people off of lands. And I think this is really important for people to understand what is happening through the false science that has been presented to all of us. We've all been told that our petroleum comes from dead dinosaurs and plant material. We're now being told that our water, we're running out of water, and of course neither one of those two realities is true. Petroleum is a renewable. It always has been. Russia knew that. There's an excellent book out, a short read, 20-some-odd pages, by John Truman Wolfe, and he talks about how the system was set up to create the idea of global warming and climate change. And it's called Anatomy of a Con Job, and I would recommend everybody read that. With one exception, sadly, at the end, where there's a discussion on how you can go about changing that, there's not the understanding that you're being presented with this evening, that we are under Emergency War Powers Act, and our government is a government that operates in name only. And so other than that, you will learn in Anatomy of a Con Job that the Russians always knew that our petroleum was found at about 30 to 40,000 feet. And they've been acquiring massive wealth where we have been being shut down with the illusion of running out. And that's one of the things that everyone, I think, needs to link with. Whenever you hear Rockefeller Foundation and what a philanthropist they are, you need to understand how they made the bulk of their money, through scientific fraud and theft and reinventing a reality that padded their pockets so that now they could take us all down. And you have to align that synonymously with Rockefeller, because they were behind the illusion of that false science with calling it fossil fuel. And what I find interesting, Randy, is in all of the plans, climate action plans throughout all of our cities, it's referred to as fossil fuels. We've got to reduce our use of fossil fuels because we're running out. And what I have found on the
we just need to clone more dinosaurs.
Well, having said that, what I would like to also say at this point, too, for everyone to look up, and because this is becoming a paramount reality of reducing farming as well, and that's the amount of water that we have. They would have us believe that we're running out of water, and in fact, we have primary water. So I would certainly direct everyone to primarywater.org, and a YouTube we have up as well, entitled Primary Water Explained, because I think we've explained the plight of the farmers. And Randy, I'm going to get into some research that I've recently
and you mentioned, Deborah, before we move on here, you mentioned Rockefeller.
I did.
And listeners out there, if they'll on YouTube, go to the Corbett Report and just type in big oil.
Can you spell that?
Spell Corbett for everybody, Randy.
Corbett is C-O-R. B as in boy, E-T-T, CorbettReport.com. And on YouTube, just type in Corbett Report Big Oil.
And what will people see?
You will get a lesson in Rockefeller, Rothschild, the British Dutch royals, the British and the Dutch royalty, and how they have conned the people. First with how they took control, and then why they've taken control. And at the end of the second video, he gets into the agriculture side too.
Well, that's excellent. Thank you for sharing that resource. Now, I'm going to be jumping into aspects of the takedown of the current farming as we know it, and this is throughout the world. And so jump in and comment at this, Randy, as you will. Understand that this is all coming from the World Bank, from Rothschild, from Rockefeller, from the resilient cities, and the takedown of the structure as we have known it. And I'm going to go over some of this, but what I want to certainly direct everyone to is for a long time we've been talking about the NASA war document that we have on StopTheCrime.net. And I've always found it very interesting on page 12 and page 13. It says this: technological ages of humankind. And it says, we were hunter and gatherers where nature provided. Then the next phase of the technical ages of humankind was agriculture, where we controlled nature, plants, and animals. The third was the Industrial Revolution, which was the mechanization of agriculture. The fourth, they say, is the Internet of Things, the biological aspects of controlling, nano-controlling, automating industry and agriculture, and the final phase of the technological ages of humankind is virtual robotization of the Internet of Things, nanotechnologies, biochemicals, industry of agriculture. Now, this was a PowerPoint that was given 2 months before 9/11 by the chief NASA scientist from the Langley Research Institute. And again, You can find this on StopTheCrime.net. I call it the NASA War Document. It actually has a different name, but for the program this evening, you'll find it that way. I wanted to talk about the different corporations that Rothschild, Goldman Sachs, Rockefeller are funding, and here is what they're saying. Agriculture is the most important market industry in the world today. Agriculture's overwhelmingly positive impact on humanity also comes at a great cost that is rarely captured in the price you pay at the register. Traditional field agriculture is a larger contributor to global pollution than oil and gas combined. Agriculture is hardly surprising given the negative externalities found in the supply chain of traditional agriculture. And they go on to talk about that 70% of our Earth's fresh water goes to agriculture, while 70% of pollution in water comes from agriculture. They go, therefore, in order to solve water, we have to solve agriculture. And this is from the Global World Task Force for the World Economic Forum. And so it's being launched that to be green and to be clean, we have to transition and must transition out of current agricultural practices. They go on to tell us that the overuse of pesticides and fertilizers has caused degradation to healthy soil, transporting water great distances to farms, shipping produce thousands of miles across the country, where it often spoils before being eaten. These are all just some of the hidden environmental costs that have caused a required hurdle towards the inability to feed 9.5 billion mouths by 2050. Now, for those of you who have not seen a recent YouTube that we have posted, I would recommend that you do, because the number of mouths that you'll hear the global controllers refer to are not the number that they have planned. What do I mean by that? There is a genocide document out, and it has been released, and it's going to be released again soon with embedded visuals so that everybody can take a look at that. And how you will find it is you will be able right now to locate it by typing in your YouTube search bar 5G Nightmare, a planned genocide. And then soon to be released with all of the visuals, you will find Global Genocide Plan 2018 to 2025 with charts and maps. And you're going to understand how the silent weapons systems now are fully engaged and why our food supply is now being taken over by Big Pharma. So let me go into what we have found about this, Randy, and I'd love to get your...
Wanted to comment here that where they talk about that the pollution from agriculture is, we'll tie that back right into big oil and the chemical industry. That the farmers led the line of, you need to fertilize, the old ways of farming will no longer work. This was started in the early 50s through today. That you need to use these chemical fertilizers, you need to use these pesticides, and the crop production will go up and you'll make more money. Now,
that's a good point, Randy, because have you ever talked or know of Howard Lyman, who wrote the book The Mad Cowboy? Because he has a documentary up that everyone should watch that is exactly what you're talking about right now, Randy. It's called the Mad Cowboy documentary. And I met Howard Lyman a number of years back when he was in that horrific lawsuit with Winfrey before it was settled, when he was letting everyone know what was in their hamburger patties. And he talks about just that. So continue on with what you were saying about the poisoning of Big Ag and what has happened.
Well, and you know, that was what the ag universities of all the states were turning out new young farmers, and this is how you do it, and this is how you make it. You use the chemicals because, you know, and the technology is improving to where instead of one guy in one day being able to cover 100 acres, now today one guy can cover 600 acres, 800 acres, depending on what you're doing. This whole line was how they told the farmers to farm from big oil. It came down from big oil.
Well,
now,
I think everybody...
they're turning around and saying that what you've done now for the last 70 years has polluted everything, and we've got to change the focus again. We've got to fix agriculture now. So
yes, that's absolutely true.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. I want to add, I'm going to talk about now the environmental impacts that we're being told from the World Bank.
Deb, before you get into that, can I just add a little something to that? What Randy was just saying, they did studies here at the University of Wisconsin where a bunch of people who have never done farm work did a whole bunch of studies, and they said, this is how you need to farm this particular crop, and that's how you need to farm that particular crop, and these are the chemicals that you need to use, and this is how you need to do everything. And after so many years, which was disastrous for a bunch of the farmers in the area, they came to the conclusion that, hey, the way you guys were doing it before was completely correct.
Well, this is what the Mad Cowboy documentary discloses. It's an excellent documentary, and I would recommend that everybody watch it. And you will also, one moment, you'll also see in that documentary Howard Lyman's fruitless attempts to change policies, because sadly Howard Lyman did not understand that we were bankrupted in 1933 and that we did not have a functioning government. And he spent 5 years with his wife on his dime in Washington, D.C., trying to change the policies. So keep that in mind when you watch that documentary, again, Mad Cowboy. And I heard you starting to make a comment, Randy, and then I want to cover what they're talking about, the degradation of the land, and now what is being told.
Okay, degradation of the land, the demineralization of the land. Because of all of these years of using chemical agriculture, we'll term it that way, if the farmers, we're going to go back to price, if the farmers were receiving the price at the first point of sale of the raw material, he would have the income to be able to be steward over his land, to be able to allow the land to lay fallow. One of the things with the Sabbath of the land that has been proven in the Lord's Sabbath of the land every 7 years is the deep-rooted weeds would take hold. They would pull the minerals from deep within back to the surface, where the surface crops, like our corn and soybeans and wheat, etc., would be, it remineralizes the soil. If the farmers were receiving the right price, they would have the income to be able to return the land back to fertility.
That is a monumental point, Randy. Now I'm going to go into what they're saying is the problem with current farming, and I think everyone will gasp, because we're going to go further into the coming pharmaceutical transition into farming and what is happening, and the transition of the global food plan as it's being moved forward very hastily right now. But here are some of the environmental impacts that they're saying. Now, I found this off of Aero Farms, AERO Farms. It's important to understand who Aero Farms is, and we'll get into that in a minute. I'll give you a definition. But they are being promoted by Rothschild, Goldman Sachs, the World Bank, Rockefeller, Prudential, and many others. We'll go into that. But here's the environmental impact. It says that traditional agriculture takes a massive toll on the planet's natural resources. We are transforming agriculture to flip the paradigm of exploitation to one of preservation and conservation. Water. 70% of our water supply goes to agriculture. 70% of water contamination comes from agriculture. Current events, future predictions, and common sense tell us we cannot continue on this path. Aero Farms uses 95% less water than field farming and has developed a closed-loop system. Pesticides in the field, overuse of pesticides has decreased the beneficial microorganisms in the soil and allowed bad ones to proliferate. Our soil is no longer healthy enough to filter out pesticides and render them inert, leading to toxicity and runoff. Runoff leads to algae blooms and oceanic dead zones. By growing indoors, Aero Farms can avoid these issues. Go on to land. 25% of the world's land is now highly degraded, with soil erosion, water degradation, and biodiversity loss. Land is a precious resource, and as soil health depletes, so does the nutrition of our food. Aero Farm uses less than 1% of the land required by current conventional growing. That means we are over 390 times more productive per square foot versus traditional agriculture, while also ensuring that our plants get all the macro and micronutrients they need all year round. Now, I'm going to make this comment right now, and it's extremely important to understand the kind of economy that we've moved into with the bankers, and it's called a circular economy. And it's when the big bankers and the groups that control new technologies meet, and the global bankers fund new technologies and promote new ways of creating new markets and phasing out the old markets. That's basically what a circular economy is. And here's what it says about Aero Farms and circular economy. Aero Farms was the first and only agriculture company to date to be honored by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation as one of the Circular Economy 100, a select group of global companies focused on eliminating waste and improving our positive impact on the environment and sustainability. Go on to tell us about carbon emissions. What we think of as farming has changed a lot, from drilling for water, pumping from deeper reserves than ever before, operating tractors, tillers, and harvesters, to washing. And I hear a break coming up, so we're going to pick this up at the other side at the top of the hour, and then we're going to dive in to Rothschild's intention to take down traditional farming throughout the world.
All right, everybody, we'll be right back after the break.
You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Go ahead, Deborah, you're on.
Okay, so we were prior to the break talking about the food transition, the circular economy, which certainly everyone needs to look up and understand. I will repeat what this means. Circular Economy 100, it's a select group of global companies, which is, of course, the controllers, the international bankers, focused on eliminating waste and improving our positive impact on the environment and sustainability. And of course, we know that the climate change is weather weapons fully engaged. We're in a silent weapons war now, using the environment on all levels. So I was getting ready to continue with the discussion of why farms are not sustainable and why farms must be transitioned into a completely new type of farming. And I'm going to talk about what they're talking about now, carbon emissions. And they say what we think of as farming has changed a lot, from drilling for water, pumping from deeper reserves than ever before, operating tractors, tillers, and harvesters, to washing 3 times in large-scale processing facilities that operate every day, all year long. Traditional commercial farming is quite energy intensive. Plus, 95% of Americans' salad greens are grown in either Salinas, California, that's the central area of California, which is often referred to as the breadbasket, or Yuma, Arizona, traveling thousands of miles to get to your plate. Aero Farms reduces harmful transportation emissions by 98% on average. That is because they build their farms on major distribution channels and near population centers to bring local fresh greens to communities who wouldn't normally have them. Now let's talk about how Aero Farms functions. Now they are being financed by the international bankers, and they are predicted to be one of the global aspects of food production. You need to understand that their farm food team consists of biologists, pathologists, microbiologists, mechanical engineers, systems engineers, data scientists, and more. They also are accelerating this transition by the circular economy, which I spoke about. This is global food disruption, eliminating waste. And Monsanto is involved as well. They're called techno seeds, and we're going to be going into this in detail. It's important to understand how Aero Farms is going to produce our leafy greens. There is going to be no soil necessary, no sunlight, grown with LED lights, and it is patented. And they will not release what is in their patents. Now, keeping in mind that they say that they're going to reduce the use of water by 95%. So the 5% is a patented concoction that chemists and scientists are going to engineer to grow these plants. Now we're going to talk about the awards that these companies have been receiving and the financing, so that everyone is clear as to the massive scale of the intention of transitioning our current farming methodology over to this new methodology. They go on to say that Aero Farms was named the Thrive Top 50 Leading Ag Tech Companies, that its awards exemplify the best in agriculture focused on innovation, recognizing companies across 6 different domains within agriculture: biotechnology, connected devices, cloud services, robotics, automation, big data, and analytics, and a supply chain. They also say that Aero Farms is recognized as one of the most global disruptive companies of the year. This is out of Inc. magazine. Global disruptive company. It says it made the list because its groundbreaking ideas and ambitious plans for bringing them to market. And they've been honored as a leading movement to grow the world's food more sustainably with zero soil and 95% less water. They also talk about how they were awarded Seed and Chips Best Smart City Version Award. Smart City. These are UN Agenda 21 cities. These are resilient cities, and we're going to talk about this more. They say that they received an award in a summit in Milan, Italy. They were presented with the Best Smart City Vision Award for its contribution to the economic and environmental sustainability in Newark and its potential to affect positive changes in cities all over the world. Also, Aero Farms has partnered with Rockefeller Foundation and the 1,000 Cities Initiative. The 1,000 Cities, pioneered by the Rockefeller Foundation, helps cities around the world become more resilient to social, economic, and physical challenges that are a growing part of the 21st century. Feeding a growing population while stemming the tide of climate change is a major challenge for cities all over the world, and we are ready to offer our experience and expertise to the 100 Resilient Cities Agriculture Division. They go on to say that they won the Governor's Environmental of Excellence Award and the World Economic Forum Circulars finalist. Aero Farms was a finalist in the World Economic Forum, the Ecolab Award for Circular Economy Enterprises. Recognizes individuals and organizations that have made a substantive contribution to upholding the principles of a circular economy within critical natural resources and where those are not threatened. They go on to say that they were also awarded the World's Technology Award for the innovative impact on the environment. The awards continue and they go on, and I'm going to read a few more to you that I felt were just diabolical. They talk about how they won the Red Herring Global Award for highlighting exciting new startups in Asia, Europe, and the Americas, and hundreds of companies from each region are viewed in a rigorous three-step process that looks at all aspects of the company. Also, the World Economic Forum Award, where they said that David Rosenberg was honored as one of the World Economic Forum's transformational leaders in agriculture. And he now co-chairs the Technological Innovative Group, helping define the global agenda on how technology can help address our agricultural challenges. In addition, he co-chairs the Circular Economy Task Force, helping lead the charge on sustainability and environmental issues, and he's also been part of the Global Water Security Council, helping confront the number one issue within agriculture and preserving our fresh water. So again, I'm just going to stop, refer everybody to primarywater.org, reminding everybody we're not running out of water. I'm going to just name a few other awards because it is fundamental for everyone to understand this is a global intention everywhere, that this is secret patented tech. So let's talk about their technology. Aero Farms is a commercial leader in indoor farming, and they grow without sun or soil in a fully controlled indoor environment. They've optimized a patented aeroponic growing system for faster harvest cycles, predictable results, superior food safety, and less environmental impact. They are going to use smart lighting. They use LED lights to create a specific light recipe for each plant, giving the greens exactly the spectrum, intensity, and frequency they need for photosynthesis in the most energy-efficient way possible. This engineered lighting allows AeroFarms to control the size, shape, texture, color, flavor, and nutrition with razor-sharp precision and increased productivity. They talk about smart nutrition. They are able to take the exact same seed from the field and grow it in half the time as traditional field farming, leading to 390 times more productivity per square foot than the commercial field farm. They go on to say that their smart plant scientists monitor more than 130,000 data points every harvest. They are constantly reviewing, testing, and improving their growing system using predictive analytics to create a superior and consistent result. With remote and controls in place, they've minimized the typical risks associated with traditional agriculture. They go on to talk about their smart pest management. Every aspect of their growing process has been optimized to minimize and mitigate pest proliferation. In addition to their controlled indoor environment and LED lighting, their growing methods disrupt the normal life cycle of common indoor pests so that they never get started. Think about that. They disrupt the normal life cycle of common indoor pests. They talk also about smart scaling. The size and configuration of this farming system is highly customizable. The systems are comprised of modulars that serve as building blocks that can be stacked vertically or lengthwise. This allows to grow in varied locations and achieve ultimate yield per square foot, no matter the space, with quick installation. We're going to go on into this because this is a diabolical scientific takedown. And yes, you'd like to make a comment. Please do.
I wanted to jump in here, Deborah, and this all sounds very exciting, very wonderful. But anywhere in that documentation, do they tell you what your salad is going to cost you as the end user? Do they say, well, the salad is going to cost you $5, but we're so sorry you only have $3 in your pocket?
They don't discuss what the end use of salad and greens will cost, but when we get into meat, they're talking about what the end use of synthetic fake meat is going to cost, and certainly what it's costing them now per pound to test and get the fake meat because they're replacing all livestock as well with another methodology. But I want to continue with AeroFarms because who they're bringing in.
Deborah, can I ask you one question first, though, before you move on? Is because they're forcing the growth rate of these fruits and vegetables and everything at such an accelerated rate, what's the nutritional value of them? Because usually it takes a little while for the fruits and the vegetables and everything to develop on their own. So, I mean, there's got to be something missing.
It's patented, and they won't tell you. And there is a genocide plan reducing the population. We've already been served up toxic food from Big Ag with all of the toxins and chemicals and fertilizers that they have set upon the farmers. So we can only imagine with Monsanto, and we're going to get into that because we're going to talk about how this is being created and how Monsanto has come into play, and I think this will answer that question. But again, they talk about how they're bringing in IKEA. Did anyone imagine that IKEA, the furniture company, would be involved in investing in this, as well as, and this is just really astounding to me, retired U.S. Army General David Petraeus is an investor as well. They go on to say that AeroFarms grows leafy greens using aeroponics, growing them in a misting environment without soil, LED lights, and growth algorithms. The round takes AeroFarms' total fundraising efforts to over $130 million since 2014, including $40 million from Goldman Sachs and Prudential. They've attracted new international investors. The investment vehicle from Mohab bin Rashid, Vice President of the United Arab Emirates, and the ruler of Dubai is also involved. New growth stage agriculture-focused funds. They have a fund now with Alliance Bernstein. And we're going to talk about Alliance Bernstein and who these people are. We're talking about Alliance Bernstein, and as being one of the funding mechanisms here, who is this? Who is Alliance Bernstein? Well, it's organized by Robert B. Zoellick, and he sits on 4 of 3 committees. And here's where this Robert Zoellick came from. This is important. He was the previous president of the World Bank from 2007 to 2014. His tenure was marked by the global financial crisis of 2008 to 2009. He also worked closely with the International Monetary Fund and major economic nations to help affected countries manage economic emergencies. So now we know that there was really no help with economic emergencies. We know that this is the economic hit team to take down countries throughout the planet. So he was also vice chair of the International of Goldman Sachs Group, managing director and chairman of Goldman Sachs Board of International Advisors from 2006 to 2007. Also, he was the secretary of the U.S. Department of State from 2005 to 2006 and was the U.S. Trade Representative from 2001 to 2005. He's held several positions in the Reagan and George Bush administrations, serving as Undersecretary of State for Economic and Agricultural Affairs, White House Deputy Chief of Staff, and Counselor to the Secretary of Treasury and Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Treasury of the Financial Institutions Policies. He also was, now I'm not picking on Zoellick because there are many other contributors, but I'm just reading one example of where these people have come from and what their thinking is and what they've already done to this country. So he was Executive Vice President for Housing and Law at Fannie Mae from 93 until 97. And he has six strategic themes. 100 days after he became the bank president, he laid out 6 strategic themes for his presidency in a speech to the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. And he said, to help overcome poverty. Now let's talk about this. Everybody needs to rent the documentary Poverty, Inc. Poverty, Inc. It's a documentary. Understand, poverty is a big business. It is a market. This is why we are seeing increased homelessness throughout the United States and abroad. This is why we are seeing climate refugees and the cost of economic refugees as well. This is a big, big business. He also especially worked in countries like Africa. Yes, we know Africa is being absolutely pillaged and raped and plundered as we speak. In South Africa, we were told about several months ago, we're now in June, so at the beginning of 2018, in Cape Town, they were talking about running out of water. They called it 0 day. What did they cause by frightening many of the villagers? They caused a massive relocation in fear of limited water resources. So he's helping Africa. Also, another point was to address the special problems of states coming out of conflict or seeking to avoid the breakdown of the state. Well, I can tell you, and we all know, that the CIA and the hitman teams that are abroad are taking down the states. They're not helping. They're using the words to make things sound good, so they continue down a path of absolute destruction. They go on to talk about how he was going to adopt a more a differentiated business model for the middle-income countries. They're wiping out the middle-income countries and the middle-class people. They were going to play a more active role in fostering regional and global public goods that transcend national boundaries and benefit multiple countries and citizens, and support those seeking to advance development opportunities in the Arab world. Now, I can only tell you that this is a brief bio on one of the participants that's involved with the World Bank and who is part of the funding team behind this global food trend that is patented. And we're going to go into more of that because, and Randy, I'd like to talk about this because we're now in a warfare, a tariff war with China, and now, of course, with Canada and Mexico, and we know that all wars are bankers' wars, and we know that the farmers are being further decimated by these trade wars. How have you seen that affecting, or what do you know about the effects of these current trade wars through our Commander-in-Chief of USA Inc. right now?
Well, it's decimated the futures market as far as agricultural commodities. That the Chinese, Europe will put their own tariffs onto our raw agricultural commodities. The price, our price to them will go up. Our price to the farmers here is going down. So what they will do is they will now look to South America. The Chinese are spending billions of dollars in Africa in agriculture. And what they're looking to do, well, the Chinese are buying up agricultural land here in this country hand over fist. I've taken over Smithfield Foods, the largest pork producer in the country. So it's to the individual family farmer out there, the tariffs are decimating them. And what that turns around is then the farmer cannot make his interest payments on the loan. His loan will not be renewed. He will have no operating funds to operate come planting season next year.
Well, all right. So now we see more of how the farms are being decimated by the trade and tariff wars, and again, remembering that all wars are bankers' wars. I want to throw in this right now, too.
Well, I got a quick question for Randy. How do they actually convince people that there is a water shortage when water replenishes itself over and over and over again and has done for millions of years at this point? It's not going to run out. So
well, it's a psychological warfare and propaganda. The same way that they've convinced people to believe that our petroleum comes from dead dinosaurs. It's just a continued psyops, and it's certainly a dumbed-down process in our educational system as well. Right, how would you like to add to that, Randy? And then I want to continue because I've just got so much left to cover here.
Okay.
The water situation is farming, and from the area I'm from, is a lot of the water is coming from the Okolalo aquifer. And it's true, it's being pumped dry. Now, that has dissipated some, because of the new sprinkler systems and, better technology, so that you don't use near as much water on a corn crop or a wheat crop as you used to. But I wanted to remind the folks of one thing, and this is from Kathleen Bertini from 1997, the UN Food Director. Food is a weapon. We
yes,
use it to control people's behavior. That's paraphrased.
That's exactly right. And
now,
beyond...
this nation, the food production was to be, the people were supposed to be on the land, and that's God's law. The people are supposed to be on the land. The production be in the hands of the many, so that it could never be concentrated in the hands of a few. And that's what we have now, is 7 or 8 multinational corporations that control the whole world's food supply.
And now we see how they are intending to transition us yet again into a diabolical repositioning of the food supply, bringing in Monsanto to help with the concoctions of chemicals that are going to go into the food. I also want to add this. These are some quotes, and it's imperative that everyone understand how the water and how the degradation of the planet is occurring through weaponized weather control as well. The U.S. Air Force announced in 1996 that they would own the weather by 2025. That is a document, U.S. Air Force owning the weather by 2025. And of course, they currently do own the weather. Also, a nation which first learns to plot the paths of air masses accurately and learns to control the time and place of precipitation will dominate the globe. This is a quote by General George C. Kinney, commander of the U.S. Strategic Air Command in the 1940s. And then they also remind us that weather modification is the deliberate, large-scale manipulation of the Earth's climate. And this was said out of the Harvard Kennedy School Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs in 2012. Again, a large part of this conversation is the control of weather, certainly the taking down of farms through all of the floods, all the hurricanes, all of the targeting of weaponized weather events, which is called climate change, and the illusion of limited water resources. We have only been taught in school about the secondary water cycle, which is rain and snowmelt. We've never been taught about primary water, which is a continuous process of hydrogen and oxygen as it comes together underneath the mantle of the earth and must exit. So it comes out of cracks and fissures. It presents itself in hot and cold springs, geysers that spray out of the ground endlessly forever. There's a beautiful geyser that I would recommend everyone go to YouTube and look at. It's called Fly Geyser, F-L-Y Geyser. It is an amazing testimony to water. Also, where oases appear in the deserts all over the world, plenty of water. We see them cascading waterfalls at the top of the mountains in Hawaii, volcano mountains, and of course we're having problems in Hawaii right now, and that's another conversation. But again, beautiful water cascading to pools down below and endlessly cascading. Muammar Gaddafi discovered primary water and was actually accessing it to 75% of his people when NATO and the United States went in and blew up the Great Man-Made River Project, which was at the time considered the 8th wonder of the world. Water is a renewable, and we have water under our feet wherever we are. So again, we're not literally pumping out aquifers until they're dry. There are chambers, and there are ways in which we access water, and we're not being told. So again, go to primarywater.org and do your homework about water. Don't let them fool you like they did with fossil fuel. This is their game, scientific fraud. So I want to talk about this. This is a toxic water alert, and it's an EPA proposed rule to withdraw certain federal criteria from California's water supply. And this is quite astounding. And it says this: the EPA is proposing to amend federal regulations to withdraw certain federal water quality criteria for lead and chlorobromethylmine and applicable to California. The state now has adopted certain criteria for these parameters. EPA approved the state's site-specific criteria, which are less stringent than the federally supported criteria, because the EPA determined that the state of California's criteria was scientifically sound and protective of the designated uses of its water. So let me explain. After the fires here in Northern California and burning of the plastic pipes and the poisoning of an area after the burn of benzene, cancer-causing, and also the discovery of many toxins in those burn areas, the state simply lowered or increased the amount of toxins that were suitable for rebuilds in those areas. So this is the same thing that you're hearing right now about the water quality standards and how they're being revised to allow levels of selenium to be higher in California than they would be allowed elsewhere. So I want to talk about other aspects of the food supply, because it is diabolical, and it is important for everyone to understand how Monsanto is involved. And Monsanto is yes.
You need to hyphenate that. It's Monsanto Bayer.
Well,
Bayer.
Yes.
To take over there. And don't forget Syngenta. And don't forget Dow Chemical. And
That's
don't
exactly.
forget ConAgra. So
that's exactly right. What people are hearing us talk about this evening is a diabolical takedown of the food supply. We've been describing how the farmers have been systematically shut down from their operations, and certainly not given the money necessary to lay their lands fallow, as you had said, Randy, to replenish the soil. But it is important to understand that now we have got Monsanto that never went away, and they are creating the patented food that we're going to be served up. This is coming toxins on our plate. Again, this is pharmaceutical food. So we're going to talk about also, we're seeing that Israel is involved in precision ag. They call it precision ag technologies, making farms smarter. And they talk about how they're trending towards complete automation for better farm efficiency and increased yields and less water, says Israeli experts. And they go on to say that precision ag sectors of water management and data science and drones and sensors will be part of the new farm modality. Precision agriculture involves collecting data with technologies such as sensors and satellite images and analyzing all that data and for practical purposes. They go on that many farms are only now getting internet connections, and with microsatellites, autonomous drones, and sensors with long-life batteries, farms can undergo a digital revolution. Once the infrastructure is laid, we'll start seeing the Facebooks and Googles of ag tech. CropX. What's CropX? CropX is a software system for advanced adaptive irrigation, and it's gaining traction in large American farms. There are sensor stations placed strategically in the fields according to GPS-enabled smartphone apps, and they sync to the phone to transmit data updates on soil conditions. Based in Tel Aviv and San Francisco, CropX not only informs farmers about the amount of water, fertilizer, and pesticide needed for each patch or specific plant at specific times, but can control the irrigation system accordingly, automatically handling the daily decisions that farmers always made. Precision agriculture has two phases: collecting data and analyzing it for practical purposes. The first phase is accomplished with technologies such as sensors and satellites. And they talk about Tarantis, and that's T-A-R-A-N-I-S, and it's based in Tel Aviv, and is raising funds and signing on customers in the United States, Israel, Brazil, Argentina, and Russia. It's previously received funding from Our Crowd, which was a venture. And they go on to talk about how they use wireless sensors that collect precise data from soil in each zone of the farm. A smart controller converts this cloud-stored data in real time into a precise irrigation fertilization cycle without human intervention at all. The system increases productivity from 15 to 31% and saves up to 27 to 75% on water and fertilizer, depending on the crop. And they say that Tavitronic measures each plant's stress level to determine when to start and to stop the fertilization or irrigation. And again, they're headquartered in Sadat, and they've raised millions of dollars from private and angel investors and the Israeli Innovative Authority, and has done pilots in Israel and Austria. The company has had its first Israeli customers and is expanding into the United States after finishing the Florida-Israel Business Accelerator. It was one of the 2 Israeli companies chosen to present at the 2017 All Tech Ideas Conference in Kentucky. We're going to talk about the Internet of Things, and touted as the Internet of Things, the digital tool belt for farmers. They go on to say that the ATP Labs uses data analytics and artificial intelligence to collect data from a crucial mass of growers to generate cloud-based, actionable, best practice advice. They say that ATP Labs, the founder and CEO, is a veteran of an elite unit, 8200 Signal Intelligence Crops, and previously co-founded Support Machines, an AI-driven chatbot platform. The company is in Tel Aviv and is privately funded by investors in Israel and California. They'll go on to tell us how Saturas, S-A-T-U-R-A-S, also based in Tel Aviv, has developed an inexpensive miniature sensors and wireless transponders to embed in the trunks of commercial fruit trees for accurate and continuous stem water potential measurements. They say following field tests in Israel, Saturas has started advanced beta sites on commercial citrus and almond farms in Spain and Israel in cooperation with Netafirm. They go on, products will be launched in time for the next irrigation season in the spring of 2018. Satyrus, a Treadlines portfolio company, has gotten additional funding from the Griffin Capital, which is a research institute and angel investors. We go on. They talk about how Aero Farms, again, is positioning themselves in Newark, and they have taken over abandoned commercial buildings, such as an old paintball building, and they've repurposed that building for growing these scientifically grown greens. And they're saying that this is perfect for the smart city. They talk about smart substrates and how they've developed that a patent reusable cloth medium for seeding and germinating and growing and harvesting. They go on to assure us that their BPA-free post-consumer recycled plastic, each taking 350 water bottles out of the waste stream, is safe. And they're going to use that in conjunction with the growing of their leafy greens for all of us. Again, we talked about smart lighting. We found out that Foxconn is building an enormous plant near Lake Michigan that is 50,000 square feet, creating a mini town, and they're creating and manufacturing LED lights. So now we know why. The LED lights are transitioning into the replacement of traditional farming. Again, they call it smart lighting, and how they'll use those LED lights to create light recipes for each plant, giving greens exactly the spectrum, intensity, and frequency they need for photosynthesis. This engineered lighting allows us to control size, shape, texture, color, flavor, and nutrition with razor-sharp precision and increased productivity. They talk about smart nutrition and how they will be able to focus on smart nutrition and smart data, how typical risks associated with traditional agriculture will be eliminated because of smart data, the remote monitoring and controlling. They talk about also drones and GPS from overhead so they can monitor all plant production everywhere. Now they are taking a global inventory of all the farms and food production. In fact, Randy, you may want to address this a bit. I know many farms and ranchers here in California, and we're the breadbasket, do get USDA required documents on what they're growing exactly, what their farm supplies are, tractors, other farm equipment. And in fact, we've known many people that USDA has come out to their properties with GPS so that they could actually GPS the locations of all their fruit trees and collect all this data, because they are now amassing where the farms are, what the current unsustainable farming practices are located, where they are, so that they can be replaced, because they talk about this being a global operation to replace farms under their current operations that are unsustainable.
Yes, and it's termed the agricultural census, yes.
Yes, the agricultural census. And don't they say on there, if you do not fill this out and get it back within this prescribed time, they will charge you an enormous fee for not doing so. Threats. Here they are, threatening the farmers. If they don't do an ag inventory, they're going to be fined and penalized. Now,
and if you go to the Code of Federal Regulations and you look it up, and down there, I've got it somewhere down here in a big pile of mess. And you go down through there and you look and you say, okay, here's this, here's this, here's this. Oh, and you are not, there is no requirement for you to fill this form out.
Yeah, and yet on the front of the envelopes it says you'll be fined, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so everybody, you're hearing the threats, you're hearing the way we are consenting to this takedown.
But we're running short on time, and there was a couple of things I really wanted to get in tonight.
And I really would like you to do that now, and then I will continue with the methodology of this transition globally from traditional farming. So go ahead, Randy.
That we really should not be surprised at any of this. This has been going on for 80 years.
Right.
The public is absolutely blind to it. They have no clue. It's the women of this nation are starting to wake up and questioning the quality of their food, which is a godsend. But we really should not be surprised at this, because this was all told to us in the law, the Bible, God's Word, that all of this would come about. The plans of the rich men of the earth. We're just laying out the Lord didn't lay out the absolute details of how they're going to go about this. But He said this is going to happen. The pestilence, the famines, the judgments of God upon an unrepentant earth. So we really shouldn't be surprised about this.
You are exactly right, Randy. Exactly right. And I'm really happy that you've brought this in to this conversation.
And a big thing for the listeners out there is get to know where your food comes from. If there's any way you can, grow your own. We've been growing a garden for 30 years, and we learn something new every year. Oh, don't do that again. Don't ever do that again. But, this really works.
And or, Randy, to support local farmers at farmers markets and buy their produce and support them. And and yes, and we really must do this now on a large scale if we plan to survive this takedown of poisons now added to the food supply and the recreation of farming, which is, of course, all part of the genocide that we've talked about. Yeah, you're right, Randy. I'm happy that you've brought this up. Absolutely necessary for people.
That's part of the solution, is get involved with your food. Because someone out there, a farmer, you want to wake up in the morning and have an egg, whether it's a big, huge corporate farm or a little guy with a little flock of chickens, you want an egg. He made a decision 6 months ago that, I'm going to incubate this egg, and I'm going to get a little chick, and 6 months from now, I will get an egg. Or you want a hamburger tomorrow for lunch. Somewhere down the road, a rancher said, I need to get these cows bred, I need to do this, and he made that decision 2 years ago so that you could have a hamburger tomorrow for lunch. People don't understand the cycle of agriculture, the timing of agriculture. They've lost touch with their food. They've lost touch with the land. And it's, you walk in the store and there it is. Every day you can go in there and you can buy whatever you want. And it doesn't take much. You're talking about Arrow Foods and all of these corporations and all of their patented processes and all of these other things. What happens if the grid goes down? Or maybe not if. What happens when?
When
the grid
it goes down.
And there is your genocide.
Well, there are many layers because we know that there are a number of grids throughout the United States. There are 3 or 4 different grids, and they can take them down any time. Just like they pulsed the grid here in Northern California, which was part of the wildfires here in the Northern California area in October of 2017. But I don't want to digress into that because certainly we're being set upon by every unimaginable crisis that could beset us. But yes, you're right. People do need to get to know their food, even if they have a very small garden. Another very important aspect of food is sprouting. Sprouting is highly nutritious. People can easily get sprouting jars or trays and sprout alfalfa and mung and broccoli and every kind of sprout, and have an immediate sprout salad, highly, highly nutritious. And sprouts grow within a few days to a week. And I think that's a very quick way for people that have busy lifestyles to get some greens that are highly concentrated with vitamins and minerals. I can also say that besides supporting your local farmers, understand that they're being beset upon by local policies, because all of the cities and city councils and county boards of supervisors across the country have adopted climate action plans. They've specifically specified rural lands, country farming lands, as being unsustainable. And they are collapsing them, and it's being done a variety of ways. Certainly, they're attacking farmers with a double-edged sword, an opportunity, and as you mentioned earlier, Randy, the economics of farmers surviving is really difficult. And so when they're positioned by someone in their local area, like a representative of wildlands projects, which are different names like Vital Lands Projects or saving land for perpetual use for future generations, where literally farmers can grant easements and reduce their property taxes, but then their land in many instances, dependent upon what type of agreement they get into, they can never sell their land for its highest value. And we know many farmers now are selling their land and getting value much greater than farm use because of increased building and increasing housing supplies. And a lot of farmers are having to leave the farm because they can't make a go of it. And now if they take on these easements because they were hanging on with the idea that they were farming for life, they get trapped. And these are all traps that farmers are falling into, and they're realizing that after they've gotten into these agreements. It's diabolical, the different aspects.
In southern Colorado here, there was a huge deal with the tax write-offs, and the corporations were buying these tax certificates from the ranchers and the farmers, and then turned around and the IRS says, oh no, those are bogus. You now, the tax certificates or the rebates you bought, corporation, you owe. Corporations coming back to the farmer and saying, give us all the money back.
Right, and then the farmer can't. Well, right. We're being set up on. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we can expect because there are grants involved, as there are everywhere. It's important to understand all of this functions from grants and agreements and printing of money and paying people off and indebting people, just as you just described right now, Randy. I'm going to talk about how a different corporation awarded a $1 million grant to Arrow Farms to improve their quality of leafy greens. And so money is being thrown around through grants. Your cities are approving grants. This is how they are bringing forth all of the climate action plans and the plans that are scuttling our ability to survive as we have always been able to survive. Well, not always, but as we were and were supposed to survive under God's law. But about the farms, and again, I think people will find this of interest. And again, this is about Arrow Farms specifically. We're going to have to get into the fake meat in a future show, but we'll continue with the leafy greens and the planned reinvention of that. They say again that AeroFarms is a global operation. It's adapted to different repurposed industrial spaces, and they started up in the Finger Lakes area of New York, and then they moved their headquarters to Newark in 2015 to be able to better serve the New York metro area. They currently operate the following farms, and their global headquarters are in Newark, New Jersey. And they talk about how and we're at the top of the hour. So everyone, please go to StopTheCrime.net and take a look at this YouTube. It will be coming out under Farms, the Farmaceuticals, the future of farming. Thank you for listening, everybody. This is Deborah Tavares of StopTheCrime.net with Randy Yarborough. And I thank you so much, Randy, for your expert contributions to this broadcast.
All right, everybody. This is Nick from Granada Farm and Wendy. We'll see you all next week.
Thank you so much for listening. God bless.